Namaste. I am Gloria Grace Rand and delighted to welcome you back to another edition of Live, Love, Engage. And I've got a guest with us today who has written a book, and I'm very curious to know about his journey and what prompted it. And we're going to hear all about that in a moment. But first, I want to welcome Rod Knoerr to Live, Love, Engage.
Great to be here. I'm excited to share my wife and my journey. It can be a benefit to your followers.
Awesome. Well, let me let all of you know a little bit about Rod, so you have some idea, a little context of what we'll be talking about today. So Rod is he's a dentist. He's a certified leadership coach, a speaker, and devoted husband to his wife, Beth, for 40 years. The last 3 in the storm of cancer, which we'll talk about. He's also a father of 5 and a grandpa of 13. That's awesome. And as I mentioned, he is an author. He has written a book called Don't Waste the Storm, and the founder of the newly formed Be the Hope Foundation and soon to be open Be the Hope Retreat. And we'll have to talk about those a little bit later as well. So love to know more about that. But let's start off today just sharing with our listeners and our viewers on YouTube a little bit about this book that you wrote. So what is it actually about, and why did you decide to write it?
Well, my wife and I, after almost 35 years of marriage, she had this kind of health storm. I'm not going to get into it. It wasn't terminal, and it was very kind of intense, supposed to be about 2 years long. And about 18 months into it, we're seeing the end of the tunnel, a lot of insomnia and a lot of stuff that went with it, Malay and everything. She has weird blood tests, and she's diagnosed with terminal cancer. And the diagnosis was 18 to 24 months to live, no cure. So we went on that journey, and it eventually, we're going to get into more of that, she did pass away in 2019. And we had relocated to Grand Rapids, the other side of Michigan, for the last treatment. Our 2 married daughters lived here, and I chose to stay. Well, about 8 months later, we're going through our first Mother's Day, and our anniversary was in May, and I'm feeling a little down, and probably grieving. And then I realized it wasn't grieving that what I was feeling. We were just going into COVID in 2020, and the George Floyd thing had happened in May, and I was grieving for our country. And I didn't go through COVID the way everyone else did, because of the way and what we learned going through the storms of my wife's terminal cancer for 3.5 years. And I realized I need to write this. And I think when you hear the word storm, you think negative. And I don't know where the name, somebody said, where did that name come from? And I think I read something, don't waste this grief, don't waste something else. And I don't know, and then in the back of my head, it was there, but it really sums it up, because what many would think is negative, the most intense, trying 5 years of our life were the years we grew closest. And that doesn't make sense. But and our impact too. So that was kind of the genesis of it. And I started writing it in June of 2020 with the goal of getting the rough draft done by the anniversary of her passing, August 6th. And that day I finished the last chapter. It took another year or so to get it out then with COVID and publishers, but yeah.
All that fun stuff. Yeah, we're trying to get a book published. I've gone through that as well, and also experienced the dealing with a loved one with cancer as well, and how now with passage of time and really seeing that there was a lot of good that came out of it. But tell us a little bit about, so you say don't waste the storm. So what really do you mean by that?
Well, I think the subtitle of the book unpacks it a little. It's Hope-Filled Thriving, not just barely surviving the storms of life. And that's what I saw when COVID hit and we all were isolated. I mean, it's not judgment, it's something we're living through. I just saw this hopelessness, this fear. And I can't tell you how many times did we hear, I can't wait to get back to normal.
Yeah.
So in essence, you're saying, I'm going to quit living. I'm putting life on hold until I get back to normal. And, as we were going into the cancer, we had been on some humanitarian mission trips to Romania for the 2 years prior to, or 3 years prior to her cancer. And we were supposed to go like a month after Beth was diagnosed. And I also had a class reunion in September. I hadn't been to one since my 10th, and it was going to be maybe my 40th. And I was, athlete, student council, all that stuff. And the first thing I did when she was diagnosed, we didn't know how the cancer treatment was. They said she's going to do outpatient, and then she's going to go inpatient, University of Michigan. And I'm thinking, oh, what if that's the weekend of the reunion? So I cancel going to the reunion. Well, then we were a couple weeks into it. We start the chemo in June, and we're supposed to go to Romania in July. And I don't know, we just thought about it, talked about it, and we said, let's just go. We're going. And the oncologist said, your cancer's your immunities, you can't fight infection, you can't go. And we went. And you're going to laugh, but back in 2016, my wife, a very kind of more mild-mannered person, did something publicly that was very embarrassing for her so she could live life. Because he said, well, you can't go to, you shouldn't go to big gatherings, don't let people hug you, we do go to church, can't do that. So can you imagine what my wife did in 2016 that just totally was embarrassing to her?
I can't imagine. So please share.
She wore a mask in public.
Oh.
Is that a joke? Less than a year after she passes, everyone's wearing a mask, but everyone thought she had an infection and was trying to give it to someone else. But I mean, so that was that. So we did go to Romania. And then after a lot of thought, I was active in a men's growth group, and she was active in different things. And what responsible people do when a storm hits is they cancel their involvement because they don't want to let someone down. And we somehow said, you know what? We're going to keep on keeping on. And if we have to cancel, someone will step to the plate. My class reunion was the only thing we canceled in that last almost 4 years of her life. And but I think the biggest thing I talk about when I speak is it was when we went about 8 months later to the University of Michigan. She had to spend 3 weeks at the cancer ward there at Mott. And as we were getting there, understand we've been doing life for 30 some years. So, we've been through a lot of challenges. But I looked at her as she was getting checked in and getting her room. I said, Beth, it's not about us. And she knew what I meant. And it was, and now I'm going to explain the perspective shift that I'm hoping as people read this book, no matter what storm they're in. And I call it the who, what, when, where, why, and how perspective shift. Is when you're hit with a storm, it can be loss of a loved one, financial, divorce, cancer. Your first question is, why me?
Right.
And my wife was the most caring, giving person. There was not a person on the earth that had a bad thing to say about her. Why, Beth? Why? And you wear yourself out saying why. Well, then the second question is, because not all storms are terminal, is when will it end? And you wear yourself out, when will it end? When? If you believe in a higher power, there's only one person can answer those two questions, not you or me. Well, then the third question, we try to get involved, and we say, how can I get us out of this? And, it's do your due diligence, but at some point, it is what it is. Yeah. So now go to the other three questions when I said it's not about us. The first question is, what can we do with the gifts and experience that we have? Where we've now been placed in cancer centers, in clinics, in doctors' offices, in different cities, with who is now around us. We ended up encouraging staff at hospitals, fellow patients, doctors, nurses, and that's where that perspective shift from victim. And I got to tell you, one of the podcast hosts asked me this, and it was so good. They say, what do you do when people put the victim label on you? Right. You can do it to yourself, but terminal cancer, everyone puts the victim label on you.
Yeah.
You're the terminal couple. And, you know, and victim, you don't have purpose. You don't live. You just exist.
Yeah.
Or, you know, as I said, you just try to survive.
Right.
To, I call it victor, or having value, finding purpose in the storm. And we'd always been active in our faith-based organization, in the community, and always tried to be of value and encourage people, but we were just, our influence just rose exponentially because we didn't play victim.
I think that's a wonderful message and also lesson for people out there, because as you say, there's all sorts of different storms that people go through. They lose their job, they have issues with their relationships, and to be able to shift that perspective from being a victim to taking more control and deciding, how do I want to be and act in this situation, because we're going through it anyway. So we can either make the best of it, or we can just cause ourselves more suffering. So I love that you did that. Now, could you share a little bit more about, like, what are some of the, you know, if someone's listening to this, let's say, and they're going through something, what would be something that they could do to help them to be able to start, you know, making that shift in perspective?
Well, I say I come up with 5 keys that as I reflect back and as I look at it, and I'm not going to belabor it, but our first one is we did have a faith. We relied on our faith, and that was huge. You know, every morning I'd have my quiet time, and I read this somewhere, because a lot of time, you know, whether it's a faith-based quiet time or it's meditation, whatever it is, to slow your brain down from the busyness of life.
Yes.
And often with me being a business owner and having 5 kids, I would run a mile a minute. I'd try to fit it in whenever. Something changed the year before Beth started her healthcare journey. I read this and it said, when do you tune an instrument? Before or after the concert?
Before. I play an instrument.
My life has been totally different since then. I used to try to slow down and reflect or pray in the morning, and my mind was just going so fast. I'm a different person because of that quiet time in the morning. So that was the first thing. The second thing, Beth was having just this awful insomnia. And it was kind of a dermatological thing. She had been on topical steroids for her whole life, and they weren't working. And they say steroids aren't good for you. Then they give her more and more when it wouldn't work, because she was so itchy. So the 2-year thing before cancer was her withdrawing from topical steroids. And it was way worse than the cancer symptoms, but a lot of it was itchiness and insomnia. And I would a lot of times try to keep her from scratching, gently caress her till 2, 3 in the morning, or she'd fall asleep. And this would go on night after night after night. One night I said to her, I said, I tried to think, I'm an avid reader, and I did not read this. This is me, I guess. I said, let's say the ABCs of gratitude. She goes, what? I said, you say a thing or a person you're thankful starts with A, I'll say B, you say C. And we had C covered. I have my oldest son-in-law's name is Zach. Gloria, in the last 3 years of my wife's life, we never got to Z before she fell asleep. Never once. And after she passed, I did it. The value of counting your blessings. When you're in a storm, you're looking at what's wrong.
Yeah.
Why me? Why? Right. Or why did this happen to me? What could I do? Why did they do it? Who you're angry with? Whatever. As opposed to, you count your blessings and it melts away.
Yeah.
But that's not what our tendency is as humans.
That
so gratitude was the second one.
Yeah, I love that.
The third one is community. And that was when we started going virtual, say, faith-based organization. Oh, it's the same. It's not the same. And we were I was in a men's morning breakfast group. She was in one. And then we'd actually started a group that met every Thursday night in our home a few months before. And it doesn't have to be the same storm. But what I laughingly say that one, I'd get up, it was 6 o'clock breakfast. And many nights I just barely got my wife to sleep, and I'd get up and I say, I got to go there for me.
Yes.
more times than not, I was there to encourage someone else. More times than not. And yet that encouraged me. And that leads into the fourth thing besides having community. And I think so often when people are struggling, especially in the storms, they isolate. And we saw what isolation did in our country. I mean, from depression to suicide rates to divorce. I mean, and I'm not blaming COVID. But that's the reality of it. The fourth one was service. And my wife always, she had the gift of hospitality, got it from her mom. And like I said, we did. And there was this young moms gathering every month that our church had for moms to get away. And this woman in our church would host a dinner for maybe 25 young moms. And Beth, always, that was her. She was meant for that, but Linda had been doing it. And Beth, I said, oh, I would love to have done that. Wouldn't you know, virtually the day that Beth diagnosed with terminal cancer, we told anybody, Linda announces her husband's retiring, they're moving out east. So our pastor's wife called and asked Beth, well, Beth didn't know even what her cancer treatment was going to be, said no. I called her the next day and said, if I have to make the meals and serve them, Beth's meant to. Beth hosted every month until we moved to Grand Rapids, till 2 months before she passed. One time, Pam, our pastor's wife, tried to cancel it was when Beth was at University of Michigan Cancer Center. And my wife, in her planning mode, said, wait a second, I have everything bought. The dining room was ready. My daughter and daughter-in-law can host it. Never missed a month. But I got to tell you, in her nights of insomnia, I would wake up and she's not next to me. She's downstairs glowing, decorating for the season, getting things ready. And everyone would think it wasn't a burden. Serving fed her. Now I'll fast forward to the last trip to Romania, which in 2019, after being a short remission of cancer, came back 2018. 2019, we get back, we went on a trip south and got back, and she hosted the Young Moms group at night. And she started this tradition the year before where she'd have a word for the year. And then she would give them a small, actually I'll go get it here. I'll show you the last one she painted. And the year before she passed, 4 years into this healthcare storm, her word was joy. Can you imagine? Well, this year she painted it, and her word was hope. And she had a Bible verse that had hope in it, Jeremiah 20:11. That was her verse. So she does that at night. She has this gathering of young moms, comes back to her cancer appointment in the morning. And without warning, we thought the treatment from September was knocking it down. Our oncologist goes, have you thought of hospice? With best numbers, I'd give her 3 months to live. No warning. So that was the answer to it. Well, she made it all the way till August. But so we moved to Grand Rapids, start treatment, seemed to be working. And it was time to commit to go to Romania on the mission trip. We decided we're going to go. And her cancer numbers were down, thought we were going to seek the experimental treatment at Michigan. And so we go to Romania at the end of July. And the day before we go, she's having abdominal pain. And they thought, oh, it's just from her spleen being enlarged. So they said, you can go. So we go to Romania. My wife talks about her faith and her journey. It's this little village. At the end, she says two things. And she talked for like 15 minutes, my quiet wife. She said, when you're in the storms of life, just go. Listen to God and go. He's got it. But at the end, she said to the Romanians, she said, when we come to Romania, everyone says how blessed they must be. And she looked at him, she says, we receive more from you than we give you. That whole phrase, more blessed to give than to receive. And I got to tell you, people do not, when they're in the storms of life, think serving others will bless them. And that was, I can't tell you. So the hope thing, I went to this grief recovery thing in the fall when Beth passed in August. And then in January, you can repeat this grief share thing again. I went there and I thought, I don't need more grief help. I need to figure out my now what.
Mm.
Now that I don't have a partner at 40 years, then now what? And so I want to start a group with some of the things I had learned. I hadn't even started to write the book yet. And I approached this widowers social group in Grand Rapids, and they thought, well, my idea was crazy. And this was a month before COVID. Well, a month into COVID, I said, there's something worse than grieving a lost loved one. They goes, what? I goes, yeah, put self-quarantine on top of it. So I started a Zoom group, and it's called a Be the Hope group. My wife's name was Beth, and that's where Be the Hope came from. And you would ask about this not-for-profit in camp. That's going to be the name of it. But the basis of it was that you have purpose, even in your grieving, and it's to lightly encourage a neighbor, a coworker, a friend, email them, whatever. Gloria, within months, I saw depression rise as people just, instead of isolating and just looking at themselves and being a victim, started to see they could be of value. So service was the fourth one.
Wow.
And I thought, so yeah, I'm talking too much. You need to talk. But yeah, so our faith, and then it was, what I say, community,
Yep.
gratitude, and service.
Yeah.
That's what kept us focused and not victims.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to get to the fifth one in a second, but I do want to, number one, thank you for sharing this, and also as I guess a testimonial in that I've seen this in my own life as well. And that it really, when I've had occasions where, well, and I think even in like probably a couple years after I lost my sister as well, is that when I would be going through some like grieving things, all of a sudden, I don't know. I just remember one time, I don't even remember what it was that precipitated it, but I just decided to either write an email or reach out to somebody on social media or something and just be of service. And my mood improved. And so you're absolutely right. Things like counting your blessings are absolutely so important. And really that cultivating an attitude of gratitude. I know people are like, oh yeah, but it does make a difference. It absolutely does. And community, as we've certainly seen over the last couple of years, that community is so important. When you're isolated, it just does no good. So share with us, what's number 5?
Professionally,
Oh,
people need community, and in whatever profession, they often don't. They often wall off, and it's just, there is such a value to that. That's why I got certified as a leadership coach right in the middle of Best Storm. I've not done a ton with it, but yeah. The fifth one, you're probably not going to, is laughter. And I'm going to start with me as a dentist. Apprehension is kind of a big thing. And because I could, relate with people, I'm pretty friendly, but I can't tell you how many times, if I could get someone laughing, they forgot they were scared. If I could get that level relationally with them. So, I wasn't thinking about that, but that's what I brought into the relationship. I was the one that was more jovial. And I'm thinking of a couple instances where I used some humor. One was when I did those ABCs of gratitude. I can remember when I had to shave Beth when she lost her hair. She felt so not beautiful.
Yeah.
She would wear her wig, would not let me see her. It's like, you're beautiful. So I thought I got up my game. So I did the ABCs of gratitude one night. I said, A is for adorable Beth, B is for bodacious Beth, C is for cute, D, X is for X-rated, D is drop dead gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I could see her smiling. But now the best one was one night, and I don't know where this came from. Somebody up there must have gave it to me. I just said to her one night, I said, Beth, what's your name? She goes, Beth. No. She goes, Beth Knoerr. I go, no. Beth Fritz. No. I goes, when I tell you, if you don't repeat it, I will keep saying it until you do. I gotta say, my wife was more the gentle-hearted one. Okay. I go, Rod's hottie. The blush on her face after being married all 39 years, Rod, she said it. And every once in a while when I could see she was down, it would just, and I don't think, when you're in a storm, you're not thinking, it's not okay to laugh.
Yeah.
I'm doing this physical meal plan workout thing for 8 weeks. online, and someone was saying the value of smiling in terms of the oxytocin, it's kind of like the value of a hug. And I read
Yeah.
that too. A 30-second hug, same with a smile.
Yeah.
Same with a smile. It's a physiological thing, but people are like, oh, you're just being stupid. It's not okay to smile when you have terminal cancer or you have been through a divorce, or so laughter.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who are listening and watching this, a while back, probably I think it was in 2020, I actually interviewed someone who had written a book about smiling and the positive benefits that it has. The name of the man is escaping me at the moment. Actually, I think he's a magician. I think he was the magician I had on.
Oh.
So I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put a link to it because yeah, it's amazing.
Well, this is a total aside, but I joined a social group here recently, and we went 6 months ago, went to these stand-up rapids, and they were awful. And for years, I have said these funny things that I have said or done or happened to dental office. I could have a sitcom. I did stand-up comedy, and my best up there going, what next? What next? This guy's nuts. But people enjoyed it.
Hey, you know what? That is one of the greatest services that you can do. So see, you're combining community. You're hitting just about all of it, and being able to do that.
But the thing about the book now, so as people have read it, they say, "Oh, what a love story." That's not what I wrote it. But then they go on, because at the end of every chapter, I put what's called refuge reflection questions. And I can't tell how many people have said, the storm I'm currently in, I'm seeing opportunity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's why I'm so passionate about getting this message of this book out, is because of that. And I think people think, oh, I don't have cancer. You don't have to have cancer. It applies. It's working with this widow recovery group in a big way. And that's why I'm hoping the retreat will be, we're going to use it for a lot of community things or faith-based organizations, and you know what, people get out in nature a little bit. That's another thing. A year into my wife's cancer, we this semi-abandoned camp was across the road from us on 20 acres on a small lake, and we what do you do when your wife has a year to live, supposedly, is you take a leap of faith. But that's what Be the Hope retreat is going to be. And yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. How could someone that wants to really execute this, to be able to start, following like these secrets and that you talk about, to thriving in this storm of life, how can they execute it and get it wrong?
Execute and get it wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing in your storm, this sounds so positive. There's a time and a place for everything, and there's stages where you barely getting by, and but that's, I guess, where the community comes in, where you have more perspective. Like I said, we're doing it together. What if you're a single person?
Right.
I think that was a difference, and the difference with us is we had some community, and I think, would we have developed community once we were in the storm, or like we had the pre-storm? So that's that realization. I'm realizing that people really need to start implementing some of these things, because they need it in the good times too, because they may not have the strength in the midst if they hadn't had some of that in place. Or like, hey, man, I had a strong relationship already with Beth. So that, to say it's easy, and that's where I'm trying to go out and speak, and hope to be doing, probably to be developing some courses and things, or some virtual stuff too, because at least to plant the seed, to get the book in their hand, and then to be able to do some coaching with some people, because that was well said, because yeah, I mean it. And yet I really, I don't know, how would you think, can you throw that, what do you think of an example of do it wrong? Then maybe that'll help my brain.
Well, I think probably how they get it wrong is just not committing themselves to it. I think not giving it a chance, I think, would be it, and just giving up at like the first, instance, it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting immediate results, and so I'll just quit. But I think maybe by not being patient and to keep at
I,
it. What do you
I
think?
totally agree. Like even community, it takes a while to form it. Even though you get a group of 6 or 8 people together, it's not going to be instant results. And at first, it's going to maybe be weird. But the service, I got to tell you, and that's some people aren't as outgoing. So what it looks like is going to be different. I'm a little more outgoing. Where, my wife, it would be more behind the scenes, simple notes to people, or writing this, or a little phone call, or drop off a meal if they're hurt, they were sick. Everybody's got to do it. I don't know if you read the book by Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages.
Yes.
What's your love language? My wife's was acts of service, and mine ended up really growing into it. That's why I think we grew so close. What was I doing but serving my wife the whole last? So yeah, I was speaking her love language, but that'd be another thing maybe to add to it in terms of that, to be able to do some of these things. Do you know your love language, or
Yeah, very
But I
good.
think that's the patience. No, it's not immediate, but you're getting a book that had a 5-year journey, and I'm reflecting back. But I do another thing I bring from dentistry, which I don't really, is I found out with anytime someone comes in to have a tooth extracted, they're expecting the worst, or a root canal. And I years ago found out from the moment I first appointment, if they're a new patient or when it's diagnosed, is tell them it's no big deal. It's going to be, it's no big deal. It's that positive mental attitude. It doesn't change everything. But now fast forward to the cancer ward at University of Michigan. And I remember looking at the staff, and the one nurse was actually from Romania originally. I heard her accent, and sure enough she was. But I said it to them in our first meeting, and then a year later we had a checkup, and they reminded me of what I said. They never heard it before. I said, we don't participate in side effects. I don't know where that came from. And they never, the whole point, positive attitude. And you know what? Did she have a little bit of nauseousness and a little with it? Yeah, but not for 3 weeks. It was like a day. It was way reduced. Now, was it all positive attitude? No, but we can talk ourselves into feeling bad. So that was a huge one, positive, and that's where gratitude comes in and other things,
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's important to note too, that is we sort of forget about that. We're like, we can absolutely talk ourselves into feeling bad and without even necessarily thinking about it. And then at the same time, we wonder why we can't then also talk ourselves into feeling good. Why can't we do that? Of course we can,
Well, that's the things I'm trying to share here. I think in essence, that's it. Yeah. When you focus on gratitude, when you start, I think so many people, when they serve others, think, oh, I had to do it. Because we had our oldest son and his wife live with us due to a change in their right during her cancer for 2 years. And they had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old when they moved in. Do you know how many people said how imposing that was? That was, my wife was born to have children. She had 5, and that just, and my son and I, who had always locked horns most of his life, we have the closest relationship since then. And I remember when he moved in, and he was kind of, well, I'm living with my dad, I'm in my 30s and this and that. It was exactly, again, seeing the opportunities in the storm. And so often, no, it's all negative. There's nothing positive that can happen. But some of the cool things we had a couple couples in our church who, wouldn't you know, they got diagnosed with cancer toward the end of Beth's cancer. And Beth passes away, and I want to go back to Marshall and visit him. I was heading back, and I thought, up until she passed, they saw me as encouragement. The second she passed, I'm the guy they don't want to ever be, a widower. So I thought, how do I reach out to them? Right. So I put on Facebook, I was coming. Anyone want to meet for lunch? Only 2 people answered. The 2 guys. The one was a big farmer. And from watching Beth and I for that 4 years, when his wife got diagnosed, it was like in July, August. Well, harvest is in September, October. He said, Rod, he said, due to the rainy spring and limiting some of what we planted, that's giving me time. They ended up going to Mayo in Minnesota to be with his wife. I wasn't that strong in day 1 of the cancer to see that opportunity, but
Right.
because they watched us for 4 years. And then the other one had similar stories, and both their wives are doing well. They beat cancer. Both were breast cancer. But so yeah, back service, gratitude, community, and
Awesome.
laugh once in a while.
Yeah.
I'd leave you with a funny story, but I don't know if your viewers want to hear it.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we close? So yeah, let's have a little, we can have some more levity. Absolutely.
Well, it's I am going to bring my faith in. I'm Christian faith. It could be, if you're Muslim, whatever, it'd be something else. But it was after I wrote the book. There's a story in the Bible where Jesus met this woman, Samaritan woman, at the well, and he was telling all about how many people she was married to, whatever, and offered her living water, as it was. Well, his fellow disciples come on the scene, and this is the part. I'd read that story many times, but all of a sudden this verse stuck out to me. And they come on the scene, they see him with this. The Jews weren't supposed to hang out with Samaritans. So that first off, but they said, Master, we get you something to eat. He says, what I have to eat, you don't know about. And then this verse, he goes, my food, this is the guy who's going to die on a cross in a few. He goes, my food is to the will of the Father and to complete his work. So serving that higher power fed him. And that was exactly what we found out. But there was this verse.
Yeah.
You get fed when you serve other people, and you do it whether you're a Christian or whatever you are. It feeds you. And it's not a burden, it's a feeding. And I got to leave that thought. But I guess the last thing would be if Google Amazon doesn't have my book. So if anyone wants to purchase it, Westbow Press is the publisher I went through, Westbow Press. And if as far as speaking, my website is in the process with the publisher coming up. But my email is my last name, KNOERR7 @gmail, because I'm just passionate about getting this message out to people, to have them find purpose in the storm and see value and be the hope to others in the midst of the storm.
All right. Well, I'll be sure and put that information in the show notes for everyone. So if they want to be able to get in touch with you and to be able to get a copy of the book and read it for themselves, I encourage you to do that. And I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. And I really appreciate all of the wonderful guidance that you've imparted and wisdom to our audience today, as well as what you've been doing through the book. And good luck with the retreats and the foundation that you're putting together.
And I guess another segue over quick is, I think as a business owner, I think so often when they go through storms in a business, you do forget to count your blessings. You do forget to have community with your team, to encourage your team, to laugh with your team. And I think those, because I had left dentistry for a period of time, came back to Michigan, bought 2 practices on the east side of Michigan. You're from Michigan, that's all General Motors area. And wouldn't you know, right after I bought it, GM filed for bankruptcy, and virtually all of my patients lost their retired General Motors insurance. And I had bought 2 retired dentist practices. I was heavily in debt. And that was back early 2006, whatever it was. And I remember looking at the staff, and I said, we aren't going to just survive, we're going to thrive. Not even knowing, but it worked. They didn't get a cut in pay, but they didn't get laid off. And I got real creative. I ended up working in another dental office, cut my practice down to days, did what I had to do, but it was an opportunity for our team to grow closer. And that's not always the case in many businesses. So those same concepts, try to apply it to your business world.
Absolutely.
World. Okay.
Well, thank you for that. See, that was worth its weight in gold right there. So thank you so much. And really, thank you for being with us today and for sharing all of this information with us. I really wish you much luck in the future, much continued luck with the book, and success, not just luck, success, and spreading your message. Yeah.
Hopefully make an impact on the world for the good. That's what you're doing. Well,
thank you. And I want to thank all of you out there who are watching and listening. And trust that you received some value from this today, our interview. And if so, I hope you'll share it with a friend and invite them to subscribe to the podcast if they aren't already. And until next time, if you're a regular listener, you know what I say. As always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.